Evelyn Mercer, a patrol sergeant with eyes that had seen too much, too early, pulled into the precinct at 2:03 p.m. sharp. Cloudy skies hung over the city like wet linen, the pavement still slick from a restless rain the night before. She checked her sidearm, her badge, her voice low and steady as she greeted dispatch. Routine, but routine never stayed quiet for long. The first call was simple. A lost child, 6 years old, sobbing at a busy intersection. His father, distracted by his phone, hadn't even noticed. Evelyn found the boy shivering, alone on the sidewalk, too scared to speak. She wrapped him in a thermal blanket, let him sip hot cocoa from her thermos, and waited until the father arrived. Tears in his eyes, shame in his voice. The boy smiled through the blur. Evelyn didn't smile back. She never did. Then came the car theft. A blue Honda, stolen from the Silver Mall parking lot. Elderly victim, no witnesses worth the time. She took statements, logged everything, handed it off to the detectives like passing a hot cup across a crowded room. Another line in the day's report. By 8:33 p.m. she thought it might end quiet. She was wrong. The call came through dispatch, hushed, tense. 119, Willow Street. Possible domestic disturbance. Neighbors heard screaming. Evelyn's cruiser pulled up 8 minutes later. A 2-story house, edge of town. Tall weeds wrapped around the porch like fingers. No movement, no noise. Just that kind of stillness that presses against your chest like a second heartbeat. She knocked once, then twice. Nothing. The glass in the front door was frosted. No visibility. So she circled to the back. The door was rusted shut. Windows, caked with dirt. But one, near the kitchen, gave her flashlight a sliver of entry. That's when she saw it. A dark smear across the linoleum. Thick. Red. Still wet. She didn't hesitate. One kick, boot to wood, and the door gave way. The air inside hit her like a wall. Mold, copper, decay. She moved slow, voice firm, no answer. The living room, furniture overturned, the carpet soaked in blood. The kitchen, worse, a woman, 2 children. All 3 gone. Their bodies frozen mid-flight, like they'd tried to run, but time had snapped them still. Wounds like torn fabric. The youngest still had a spoon in her hand. Evelyn called it in. Backup was 15 minutes out. She knew she didn't have 15 minutes. Behind the pantry, she found stairs leading down. Narrow, old. At the bottom, a trap door, bolted shut. She tore it open with bare hands, ignoring the pain. Beneath it, a tunnel, stone walls, metal rails, lights long dead. This wasn't new. It wasn't built for storage. It was built to disappear people. She entered. Doors lined the hall, locked, code-sealed. The air was heavy, not with rot, but with procedure. She found the lab by smell first, bleach, blood, and electricity. Inside, body bags, labeled, organized, organs in jars, numbered, fridges full of blood. And then, a speaker crackled. A voice, rough, amused, filled the corridor. "No one's coming. You'll die down here." Her grip tightened on her pistol. Fear coiled in her chest. But she didn't back out. A trap went off. White flash, heat, metal slicing her side. She screamed, hit the floor, rolled. Pain flared, sharp and clean. But she got up, kept going. Then movement. The killer came at her fast, blade in hand, blood on his coat. She fired, missed, again, hit. He tackled her. They crashed to the ground. She got the knife, put it in his throat. Watched the life go out in his eyes. When backup arrived, they found her on the ground outside the tunnel entrance, clutching her side, blood soaking her uniform. But alive. The story hit federal desks within hours. FBI agents in gray suits, eyes like polished stone, sat across from her under cold lights. They didn't ask what she saw. They already knew. That site? Just one node. There were others. Hundreds. Evelyn didn't argue. She didn't cry. She listened. And when they told her this was just the beginning, she nodded. Because in her heart, she already knew. You don't crawl through hell and come back unchanged. And if this was war, she was already a soldier. 3 weeks passed. They called it administrative leave, but Evelyn knew better. It was exile, a polite way of saying, we don't know what to do with you. She'd seen too much, said too little, and survived something that wasn't supposed to exist. Her apartment sat just south of the interstate, where the hum of highway traffic replaced the silence she once found comfort in. Nights blurred, sleep came in fits, and when it did, it dragged her back, through corridors soaked in bleach and blood, through screams caught in vents. Every dream ended the same way, alone, in the dark, still breathing. Then one night, her mailbox offered something unexpected. No return address, just an envelope, yellowed like it had waited too long. Inside, a single photo. At first, meaningless, a room, a table, a body, splayed open like a science exhibit. Male, chest cavity empty. The eyes were still open, glassy and gray. But on the back, written in ink, May 11th, Chicago, Industrial Zone, Warehouse 4B, you walked into the dark once. Will you walk again? She didn't think. She packed a bag, clothes, her badge tucked under a false name, one sidearm and a burner phone she hadn't touched since the academy. No one was notified. She boarded a midnight bus heading north. No plan, just momentum. Warehouse 4B stood alone in a broken part of Chicago. Cracked asphalt, rusted signage, streetlights long dead. The building leaned like it had something to hide. The lock was already cut. Someone had opened the door for her. Inside, dust choked the air, and metal groaned with the wind. But beneath the industrial decay was something else. Familiar, wrong. Blood. She followed it through the narrow halls into the cold, a refrigeration unit humming too loudly for a building this dead. Inside, 5 bodies. Each opened with surgical precision. No mess, no chaos, every organ removed, clean cuts, numbered tags, but this wasn't murder, this was inventory. On a nearby desk, documents, medical logs, patient profiles, ages, blood types, genetic markers. Some names were crossed out, others marked with dates, and one word printed in bold across the bottom, Nexus R. She didn't know what it meant, but it felt like a pulse, a signal, and then footsteps. 2 men, gray uniforms, one with a rifle, the other holding a tablet, scrolling. They spoke in clipped phrases like grocery clerks doing inventory. New shipment. Transferring to New Mexico node. Use Route 9. Keep it off grid. She held her breath, pressed between rusted lockers. Let them pass. They didn't know she was there, but someone had wanted her to be. She slipped out into the night, adrenaline flooding every nerve. Her thoughts raced. New Mexico, a node, a shipment. This wasn't a splinter cell. It was a system, organized, hidden, funded, and worse, protected. Back at her motel, she encrypted everything she'd photographed and sent it through an old channel, the kind meant for when you see something they don't want written down. And then she waited. The knock came at 9:47 the next morning. Not law enforcement, not bureau, just a man in a gray coat. He knew her name, didn't say how. He handed her a flash drive. We work on the other side, he said. Then he left. On that drive, maps, dozens. Dots scattered across the country like drops of blood on canvas. Satellite images, facility layouts, shipment logs, medical codes, and a legend at the bottom, known nodes 1,143. Active nodes 867, core, unknown. Evelyn didn't blink, didn't flinch. She just stared at the screen. She could disappear, let the map fade, burn everything and vanish. But that wasn't who she was, not anymore. She'd stepped into the dark once. Now she was ready to go deeper. She drove west. No plates, no GPS, no cell signal. Evelyn Mercer became a ghost in her own country, traveling roads forgotten by satellites, motels that didn't ask for names, truck stops where the coffee burned like rust. The map on the flash drive pulsed in her mind. A red dot in the dead center of New Mexico. No name, just a label burned into the metadata. Ruin, primary logistics node. The name fit. Ruin was nothing on paper, just an abandoned military-industrial zone decommissioned decades ago, swallowed by dust and silence. But satellite data told another story, heat signatures where there should be none, movement beneath the sand, and a signal, faint but persistent, coded like heartbeat static. She left her vehicle 4 miles out, walked the rest under moonlight. The facility rose from the desert like a carcass, steel ribs jutting from concrete skin. Cameras panned. Lights hummed behind empty windows. The fences weren't to keep people out. They were to keep something in. She entered through a forgotten air duct, belly crawling through spider webs and chemical dust. When she dropped into the administrative floor, the silence hit her like cold water. Monitors blinked. Air recyclers still hummed. This place was alive, waiting. She slipped through it like vapor, found the server room, yanked the main drive, then went deeper. That's when the rules changed. Below the surface, logic stopped. She found rooms lined with tanks, not machines. Organs, still alive, suspended in fluid, pulsing, monitored, each labeled, numbered, assigned. One chamber resembled a gallery. Shelves of body parts arranged like museum exhibits. Limbs, heads, torsos, each bearing surgical scars and data tags. A map of anatomy turned into a filing system. But the worst room was the lab, the assembly room, table, tools, plastic dividers, overhead cameras recording every angle, a sterilized checklist on the wall, intake, assessment, extraction, conditioning, preservation, shipment. One monitor still glowed. Last operation, 17 hours ago. Evelyn stared at it. They were still here, still working. Then footsteps, not fast, not panicked, methodical. She ducked behind surgical shelves. A man walked in, white coat, face covered, holding a handheld scanner. He moved along the tanks, checking vitals. Then 2 more followed, not in scrubs. In body armor, rifles half hidden under lab coats, not guards, not medics, soldiers, in surgical dress. Evelyn's breath froze in her chest. She could have fired, could have made it a bloodbath. But information was her weapon now. She held. When they passed, she moved. Down another corridor. There, a terminal, logged in, no password, almost like someone had left it open on purpose. Tabs blinked across the screen. Batch 9A. Phase 2.0. Node, California. Corpse disposal protocol. Shipment, South Corridor. She copied everything, then ran. Her planned exit was sealed. She cut through a side corridor, only to realize it led down, not out. What she found there haunted her worse than the bodies. Pods, dozens, maybe hundreds, each sealed in glass. Inside, people, some asleep, others just still. Monitors on their chests, tubes in their arms, blood being drawn, data being harvested, tags above each pod, blood type, tissue compatibility, genetic resilience. This wasn't murder. This was farming. She took photos, dozens, as many as she could. Then a klaxon screamed. They knew. Red lights flooded the chamber. Footsteps pounded steel. Voices barked commands in clipped, calm rhythm. Evelyn ran, bleeding from her shoulder, vision flickering. One of the soldiers slipped behind her, dropped hard onto a railing. She didn't stop. She climbed through a vent system, dropped into coolant tunnels, scrambled through chemical haze. By sunrise, she was outside. Barely. At a safe house in Santa Fe, she locked the door, barricaded the windows, and for the first time in days, breathed. Then she opened the files. Among the corrupted data and exported logs, she found it. A video. Blurry. Night vision. A man's face obscured. He spoke slowly, clearly. The market is shifting. Nodes must coordinate. We've moved beyond extraction. We are in Phase 2. The Southwest is secured by Marlowe. Dexter Marlowe. He was calm, too calm. Evelyn's hand closed around the mouse. She hit pause. Dexter Marlowe. That was the name on the earliest manifest, the signature on the oldest protocols. He wasn't just a coordinator, he was a keystone. If she found him, something would fall, and she would be there to make sure it never got up again. The name echoed louder than any scream. Dexter Marlowe. He was nowhere, not in federal databases, not in corporate logs, not in dark web archives, not dead, not born, just present, like static on a screen or a shape in your peripheral vision. But in the metadata of every major operation, in the shadows of every shipment tag, his name appeared like a watermark. Not the killer. The organizer. The data pointed to Colorado, a cluster of peaks near the spine of the Rockies, a forgotten mining town called Graving Ridge, abandoned since the 70s. On paper, it was a conservation zone. In reality, it was a place the satellites didn't bother watching. Exactly the kind of place monsters dig into the earth and call home. She crossed the border in a stolen SUV, changed plates twice, cut through a snow line with no cell signal, no heat, and only her pulse to measure distance. 2 days of cold, 1 night of rain. Then Graving Ridge appeared, like a painting of something that once lived. The town was hollow. Buildings slumped like old men. Metal signage flaked in the wind. Not a single bird, not a breath of life. But under the bones of the place, something moved. The heat signature came from beneath a collapsed movie theater. She watched for a full day. Camped in a crawlspace under a derailed cable car. Saw 2 movements. A figure in camouflage slipping through a rusted basement hatch, and later, a black Jeep arriving under the cover of night, unloading a crate the size of a coffin. This place wasn't dying. It was digesting. On the 3rd night she entered, the theater floor had rotted out. Beneath it, a steel staircase spiraled into rock, and past it, a door sealed not with locks, but logic. A terminal. A retinal scanner, she bypassed it with a tool stolen from a lab 2 states ago. Inside, she found the truth. A bunker. Not military, biomedical. Polished walls, LED strips, clean air flowing through vents with a low, steady hiss. The floors below were stacked like layers of an autopsy. Chemicals, operation logs, cryotanks, data servers, living spaces. And at the core, a prep room, a surgery deck, a name board. On the wall, digital columns of names scrolled by. 3 colors, yellow, active red, expired green, scheduled. She scanned them instinctively, until her breath caught in her chest. There it was. Rosalie Mercer, scheduled her sister. Gone 15 years ago. Taken from a bus stop while Evelyn was in training. The case went cold in 3 weeks. Her mother drank herself silent. The name had faded from public memory, but Evelyn never forgot. And now it was here, like someone had kept her in a drawer this whole time. She descended further, hands shaking, past sealed med labs, past operating rooms still warm, past floors that stank of chemicals and soundproofing. At the very bottom, in a chamber humming with data screens and the soft hiss of machines, she found him. Dexter Marlowe. Sitting like a king in a cathedral of wires. Not a scalpel in sight, just control panels, logistics charts, genetic flow maps dancing across a dozen monitors. He didn't look up, just said, "You finally made it?" His voice was soft, measured. He looked like an academic, thin, pale, older than she expected, hair neatly combed. He spoke in metaphors, of balancing the equation, of managing what nature wastes, of offering purpose to the forgotten. He talked like he wasn't a villain, but a visionary. And then he said something she didn't expect. "You'd be perfect in my place. They're tired. They want someone who understands both sides." She raised her weapon. He pressed a button. Darkness. Gas flooded the room. Her training kicked in. Emergency filter mask, adrenaline spike, low stance. Shadows rushed her. Men in lab coats with syringes, not guns. They didn't want her dead. They wanted her on the table. She made them regret that. 2 rounds to the first one's throat. A third in the knee of the second. A fourth snapped into the strobe light overhead. Blood sprayed clean walls. The sound was surgical. She ran and found the containment unit. Rows of pods, human beings inside. Most were unconscious, sedated, plugged into machines that hummed like lullabies. But one pod near the end blinked red. Inside, her, Rosalie, still breathing, still here. Evelyn cracked the seal, dragged her sister out. Rosalie opened her eyes, dull, unfocused, but whispered something. "You came." Then she passed out. Evelyn carried her. Up the stairs through alarms, past fire suppression systems spitting vapor like breath from a dying throat. Every step cost blood. But she didn't stop. At the top of the final corridor, Marlowe stood waiting, bleeding, smiling. He said she could run, but she couldn't stop what had already started. He said another node would rise, that this was evolution, that she, of all people, should understand. She looked him in the eyes and pulled the trigger. Once, in the chest, twice, in the head. Silence. Behind them, the facility began to detonate. Self-cleaning protocol. By dawn, it was a crater. But Rosalie was still breathing. And Evelyn, she wasn't running anymore. She was hunting. They called it a natural gas explosion. That's what the official report said. Nothing about the underground facility, or the bodies, or the names on the wall. Just an abandoned structure near Graving Ridge collapsed due to unknown pressure buildup. No casualties, no investigation necessary. The truth didn't make the news, but it echoed in quiet corners. Encrypted chat rooms, untraceable inboxes. Old military lines that hadn't buzzed in years began to light up again. Someone had hit a node. And that someone wasn't dead. In a safe house in Arizona, Evelyn stood over Rosalie's bed, watching her sister's chest rise and fall in slow, labored rhythm. It had been days since the escape. Rosalie hadn't spoken again, not fully, but she gripped Evelyn's hand every time a nightmare pulled her under. And that was enough. Outside, the world moved on. People drank coffee, took selfies, laughed under office lights, unaware that beneath their streets, facilities like Graving Ridge still breathed. One night, Evelyn received a message. Short, encrypted. "You're not the only one. Meet us. Texas. H." She knew the name. Agent Hampton. The federal ghost who'd once interrogated her. Looking for something she couldn't say out loud, he'd seen the truth in her eyes. And now he was reaching out. The meeting point. An abandoned Air Force hangar in West Texas. Inside, 5 others. Not rookies, not lawmen, survivors. 2 were former military intelligence. Brothers, both scarred by operations they weren't allowed to admit had happened. One was a CDC forensic specialist who'd traced virus samples to clinics that didn't legally exist. One was a hacker named Kyle. Pale, fast-talking, brilliant. A digital ghost who'd once leaked pharmaceutical patents before vanishing into the deep net. And the last, Evelyn, the anchor. They didn't call themselves heroes. They called themselves Zeros, because they were the first to look into the dark and say, no more. Their mission wasn't protest, it was sabotage, precise, untraceable, ruthless. The first target was in Seattle, a private neonatal clinic posing as a genetics lab. Above ground, cribs, soft lighting, press photos of smiling doctors. Below ground, freezers, petri dishes, rows of embryos tagged with donor codes. Evelyn found a storage unit labeled Nexus R Sample Archive. Inside, tissue harvested from newborns, alive at time of removal. One of the guards, a former Navy man, stood frozen when she confronted him. His hand shook. His eyes flicked to the camera. Evelyn didn't say a word. She just put her weapon down, gave him a choice. He stepped aside. When they left, the lab was in flames. Not flashy, not loud, just final. Next came Delaware, a data node masked as a pharmaceutical compliance firm. Kyle cracked the firewalls in less than 3 hours. What they found inside was a web of names and payments. Voluntary research donors who never consented. Blood samples rerouted across state lines. Organs processed, cleaned, frozen, then sold. It was a network. Digital veins pumping life from the poor to the wealthy, from the invisible to the powerful. Evelyn watched it all. Her fury no longer hot, just cold, surgical. And the Zeros moved faster now. They weren't ghosts anymore. They were blades. But then the network responded. Hard. 3 days after the Delaware leak, a house in the suburbs of Atlanta exploded. 2 members of the Zeros died, the rest scattered. Evelyn stood in the wreckage the next morning, boots crunching over ash and drywall. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just stared into the blackened hole and understood. They were afraid, not of exposure, of change. They'd ruled the underside of the world for too long, uninterrupted, unseen. Now there was a fracture, and Evelyn Mercer had become a wedge. Back in the Arizona safe house, Rosalie stirred. This time, she spoke. Not much, just 1 sentence. But it was enough to shift the war again. They called him the quiet architect. Evelyn leaned in, heart slowing. What did you say? Rosalie looked past her, eyes unfocused, voice dry. He built it, not the pain, the system. Kyle dug into the name. 2 days later, he had it. Dr. Grant Calder, disappeared 10 years ago, former MIT mathematician, specialist in probabilistic logistics. Before he vanished, he was designing routing models for biomedical shipments, optimized to avoid customs, surveillance, and digital trace. He didn't just understand the system, he designed it. And according to Kyle's decrypts, he was alive. Somewhere in Nevada, in a burned-out town called Logan Ridge. On paper, it had been evacuated after a wildfire in 2012. But the satellite feeds, they showed heat, energy, movement, a node, maybe the node. And Evelyn? She was already packing. She wasn't chasing ghosts anymore. She was coming for the architect. Logan Ridge wasn't on any tourist maps. It used to be a mining town, back before mines went dry and fires claimed the forest around it. Since then, it had become one of those places where wind whistles through broken windows and memories rot in the corners. Officially, it was dead. Unofficially, it breathed. The satellite images didn't lie. Thermal traces pulsed through the cracked pavement like veins. Supply trucks appeared twice a month. Drone flyovers were jammed before they even reached the perimeter. The town was empty, but underneath, something waited. Evelyn rolled in with the zeros, now just 4. 2 brothers from Intel, Kyle and her. They didn't talk much. Each of them had lost something in Atlanta. Now they wanted the kind of silence only fire could bring. They parked 2 miles out, approached on foot. Evelyn took point. Her body ached from old wounds, but her mind was surgical. Every window, every rooftop, every shadow, calculated. She didn't flinch when a loose board snapped under her boot. This was enemy ground. But she didn't feel like prey anymore. The entry point was buried beneath the town's old general store, a trap door, hidden under what looked like decades of mold and dust. They opened it. It didn't creak. That was the first sign. It was used often. Beneath it, stairs, concrete, clean, too clean. They descended into an abyss made of intention. The bunker wasn't military. It was precise, modern, reinforced walls, redundant power grids, biometric doors. Every corridor was marked. Log Section A, Core Chamber 4, Medical Recovery. They moved in pairs, quiet, fluid. The facility wasn't abandoned. It was being emptied. Files half shredded, drives pulled, containers still dripping condensation. Someone had triggered evacuation protocol. But they hadn't left yet. On the 3rd level, they found it. The wall. Dozens of names printed on glass panels, backlit by cold white LEDs. Not documents, not ID tags, inventory, yellow, viable red, expired blue, awaiting extraction. Green, in transit. And next to them, stats, blood type, DNA compatibility, failure risk, assigned node, people turned into numbers. Evelyn stared at the list. She didn't blink, didn't look away. This was what they had been fighting. This was proof. She took photos, all of them. Then they descended further. Because names weren't enough, they needed the man behind them, the architect. The final floor was unlike the others. Quieter, no fluorescent buzz, just the soft hum of cooling systems and servers blinking like eyes in the dark. They passed a decontamination chamber. Then, finally, the core, a circular room. At the center, a single chair, surrounded by monitors and light boards. A man sat there, thin, pale, mid-40s, hair graying at the temples. His fingers danced over a touch screen, moving shapes that looked like medical supply graphs and probability curves. He didn't react when they entered, just said, "You're late." Dr. Grant called her, the quiet architect. His voice was soft, calm, too calm. He spoke like a man explaining how a machine worked, not defending the horror he helped build. "I didn't design the death. I designed the movement. Organs, not people. Logistics, flow. You blame me because I made it efficient." Evelyn stepped closer. He looked up. Their eyes met. "If you kill me," he said, "the system survives. If you understand me, you could control it." She raised her pistol. He smiled and pressed a button under the console. Gas, again. The chamber filled with it, fast and acidic. A shriek from behind, one of the brothers choking. Evelyn slammed her mask on, dove sideways. Flashes, gunfire. 2 soldiers burst in, not in armor, but in surgical gowns. They didn't shoot. They carried needles. She didn't hesitate. 1 shot, center mass. 2, to the second's leg and throat. Blood splashed across the architect's perfect graphs. He tried to run. She tackled him before he reached the emergency exit. They fought, graceless, violent, breathing each other's sweat. He begged, offered passwords, maps, safe zones. She didn't listen. She didn't need to anymore. The bullet went under his eye. His body hit the floor with a wet snap. Silent. Done. She didn't speak, didn't look back. She grabbed Kyle's hand, bloodied, shaking. and ran. The self-destruct countdown had started. One of the Intel brothers stayed behind to hold the exit. His final words came through static. "Take it all down, make it burn." And then the mountain groaned. Logan Ridge collapsed in on itself. The sky turned orange. The bunker was gone. So was the architect. But the system? Still breathing. Still out there. And Evelyn? She'd never been more ready to finish what she started. Washington, D.C., marble floors, high ceilings, men in suits who speak in timelines and committee minutes. The kind of place where truth doesn't echo. It absorbs. Evelyn stood in a hallway outside a secure chamber. Her body still ached from Logan Ridge, cracked ribs, healing lacerations, bruises blooming under layers of fabric. But her eyes were sharp, focused. She wasn't just carrying scars now, she was carrying proof. On the table in front of the committee, a single flash drive. Inside it, names, blood trails, DNA logs, satellite images, shipment manifests, thousands of documents from facilities across the country, some burned, some still running. Everything they needed, everything they never wanted to see. She spoke for 7 minutes. No drama, no raised voice, just facts. There are nodes, there is funding, there is oversight, and there is silence. She listed locations, facilities, victims, coordinators. And at the end, she looked at them, not as a witness, but as a blade. One senator asked, "What do you expect us to do?" She replied quietly, "Decide, because if you don't, I will." Silence. No applause, no debate. Just the rustling of papers and the weight of a truth too heavy to carry politely. That night, Evelyn stood on the rooftop of her hotel, watching the city below. Golden lights, traffic, people moving through their lives without ever seeing what lived beneath. Beside her, Rosalie, still recovering, still quiet, but alive. And in her silence there was strength. She had started to remember. Details, names, rooms, doctors, and one word that came back again and again. Rebirth. Evelyn didn't ask what it meant. She already knew. It wasn't just about harvesting. It wasn't just trade. It was about engineering, controlling what lived and what didn't. 1 week later, she received the encrypted transmission. A new dot on the map, Buenos Aires. Underground research facility, familiar blueprints, same signatures. The system had always been global. They had just been fighting in one corner. She met with Kyle and the others, what was left of the Zeros. New faces had joined, more survivors, more fire. The movement had changed. It wasn't a resistance anymore. It was a front. They didn't seek to expose. They aimed to erase. Facility by facility, one node at a time. When Evelyn loaded her gear that night, she moved with purpose. No doubts, no fear, just the same thought she'd had since Willow Street. You don't wait for justice. You build it, and then you kick in the door. End of Book 1. Zeros. But Evelyn Mercer's war isn't over. Not even close. She's just getting started.